And welcome back to PSA TV. This is Eye on Labour. On set I've got with me the chairman of the PSA ADB section, Mr. Avinash Maharaj. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Good morning to all the viewers. Good morning to the executive.
Yeah.
And I want to say a special good morning to my colleagues at the Agricultural Development Bank. Special good morning to you guys.
How are you this morning?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back on again.
Yes.
My second time on the show.
Yeah.
Very excited to be here.
First time you're downstairs here, like we were just talking about. You know, this is our designated space for
Right.
it. So
It's great. I love it. As I said in my first time, I was very happy about this initiative. So you all are doing a great job.
thank you. And it's, you know, by extension, we have a really dedicated team. Those guys put in the work.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of work, but you guys are really doing a good job. I mean, viewership has been increasing. I've been able to get more persons from the ADB involved and looking at it, even while they're not at work, but probably later on with the show. So hopefully it grows from strength to strength.
And what has been happening with the ADB these days?
ADB, we have been working very hard. Our financial year end is September 30th, as with most government entities. We are trying to reach certain targets. The employees have been going the extra mile. We have set specific targets that we want to hit. And hopefully when management realizes how hard we work, then the rewards can be afforded to us in kind, hopefully.
Hopefully, right? No, because I mean, the way things are sometimes, management sees it, but they just turn a blind eye.
Yeah. I think ADB is unique in the sense that it is a bank, but in this case it is a state-funded bank, even though we haven't received subventions in recent times, but it does financing that is typically different from commercial banks. So whereas commercial banks would finance persons based on risk, and the pricing mechanism that they use is based on your risk level as an individual, ADB's pricing, which is its interest rates, are actually set and limited by the board. So it's not really a for-profit bank, but it's more of a developmental bank, and that's why it's in the name, Agricultural Development Bank. So it's more geared towards developing the agricultural sector, developing agri-entrepreneurs in that sector by giving them affordable loans with flexible terms.
And we all know how much the agricultural sector needs something like that.
Right. So it has been, I think it has been disappointing that in the past that such little emphasis has been placed on agriculture. And that spans, I think, the country's history. We have not invested enough in agriculture. I think the average citizen on the street recognizes that a lot more needs to be done in the agricultural sector. The unfortunate thing is that the politicians don't see it. And I have radical views.
I think they see it, you know.
I think they see it, but there's not much money to be made in agriculture, is there?
That's what they think.
It's, I mean, there is money to be made.
The agenda, the hidden agenda.
The hidden agenda.
I got you.
The corrupt practices that you can do with other things. It's not as clear-cut in agriculture. It's a risky sector. So the projects that you invest in,
it's not going to benefit their pockets.
Correct. And I think that is why there hasn't been so much investment in agriculture, but there has been large investment in other industries like the energy sector, which feel investments which have redounded to the detriment of not only the country but of those sectors. We know our case there, Petrotrin. I mean, look at what has happened, right? We had a cocoa industry, a sugarcane industry, both have been closed a long time. Now we have Petrotrin, our energy industry is now, we don't know where that stands.
It's in shambles.
It's in shambles. So where are we going to get revenue from? I mean, the government makes revenue from taxes and investments, essentially. Recent governments have found innovative ways of deriving revenue by sale of state assets and getting income from borrowing.
Yeah.
But that puts a strain on the economy. I mean, where has there been any initiative for diversification?
And funny enough that you're talking about diversification, because actually that's what's in my head right now. Because time and time you hear, we're going to diversify the economy. We need to diversify away from oil and gas. And
investments in anything else is non-existent.
no.
So, and agriculture is one of the opportunities.
That is the easiest way.
The easiest thing.
And probably perhaps one of the most beneficial way to the population.
Yeah.
It will stop a lot of us from eating fast food.
Correct.
You grow your own crops,
Yes.
your food import bill will ultimately decrease because
Yeah.
it's really high right now.
Yeah. I think as well, a lot more needs to be done in the agricultural sphere with respect to protected agriculture
Yeah.
and a greater drive towards technology in agriculture. Because we can't deny it anymore, climate change is a
It's
real thing
real.
and you're seeing the impacts every day. I mean, just the heat alone over this
Yeah.
period has been crazy, right?
And
I mean,
September, I think, is one of the hottest months of the year.
yeah. And then the erratic rainfall,
Yeah.
the unpredictability of rain, then hampers farmers in knowing what they're going to plant, when they're going to plant, because all these things are changing.
Yeah.
So there needs to be greater initiatives and drive into investment in protected agriculture and technology-driven type projects.
And when you speak about protecting agriculture, you know what comes to my mind as well? Pretty larceny officers. I haven't heard about the officers in a long time, but I know there was, at a point, there were officers set up to man these agriculture farms, but I don't know what has happened to them. I think it's also something very critical because in a day and age where we live, where you can't really leave anything exposed and leave anything to any and anybody.
Yeah.
That is also a growing
That is a
concern
challenge.
for farmers.
That is a great concern. But an even more major concern is land tenure.
Yes.
So, and this goes across the board and it spans all different sectors and all different people are impacted by it. We have persons on the East-West corridor in general, even in residential areas where they're living on lands that they do not have tenure for,
Yeah.
which then limits how they do business, right? I mean, if you own property, you can mortgage that property and leverage that into financing from a bank to start up businesses and earn income. But land tenure is an issue, particularly in the agricultural sector, because if people don't have tenure to the plots that they plant, they would not invest
Yeah.
the type of money that's required to develop those projects, the infrastructure that's needed, the drainage that's needed, the land preparation that's required. They just won't do it because it's land that doesn't belong to them.
And I'd imagine now that because the land doesn't belong to them, it would be more difficult for them to get any kind of help.
Correct. So whereas persons who own their properties can mortgage those properties
Yeah.
and that's good collateral from a bank perspective. Persons without tenure, they have to have other forms of collateral, meaning cash collateral
Yeah.
or some other type of
That will now
collateral.
put a
That's
strain on them.
correct, and it would limit the amount of borrowing that they could do. So whereas a property may be valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars, you can
Yeah.
leverage that into borrowings to develop infrastructure on the property. If you don't have that and you have to use cash, how much cash do you really
Yeah.
have? Let's say
Yeah.
50,000 of cash.
You'll be working at a loss.
Yeah, I mean, precisely. It limits how much you could do. And that then stymies the development of the entire sector and food availability for the country.
But who's responsible for ensuring that land tenure is obtained?
Right, so the Ministry of Agriculture, through the Commissioner of State Lands Department, is responsible for all the state lands in the country. We have persons who have been waiting, who have made applications for leases and have been waiting decades
Yeah.
for leases, right? While they're not being moved from the land, there is still that level of uncertainty with respect to, I mean, you don't have any concrete
any ownership.
documentation
Yeah.
to say, well, you're supposed to be here. You don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen from a day-to-day basis. How can you then plan long-term for a
Yeah.
project? So you find that these farmers are doing more short-term type projects.
It's kind of like what
and it's very
happens.
small scale.
It's kind of like what is happening in the working sector in the job sector and job market, where you have less and less permanent contracts.
Less permanent employment,
can't.
more contract type employment. So the security of tenure for earning income has diminished, which then is bad for the economy as well, right?
Yeah.
So we have persons who losing their jobs quite frequently, unemployment, even though the Labour Ministry produces statistics which...
She says the labour market is very strong.
Yeah, which is, to me, is contradictory to what we know
course.
as being on the ground. I mean, I was looking at one of the television newscasts the other night, and data coming out of the Ministry of Labour showed like 1,200 jobs lost 2017, 2018, 2019. But in 2018, we had the closure of Petrotrin. And we know 5,000 people lost their jobs.
I think
so then, how could your data for 2018 be 1,200?
It's a misrepresentation.
So something's wrong with that. And we know that the unemployment figures are a lot higher than
over
they are.
65,000.
I don't know if the situation is that, well, unemployment really reflects persons who are not working but are actively seeking employment. So I'm not sure if the situation is that these people are not working and they have just given up all hope and have resorted to other types of things to provide for themselves.
I think one thing which many people fail to realize, a worker isn't affected alone. A worker by extension, his family, the community. If we take Petrotrin, for instance, Petrotrin was known to have many small businesses in the community.
Correct.
And I don't know who I had on set, and the person was telling me that Gasparilla is now like a ghost town.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad because not only are families affected, but even supporting businesses, as you said, and their families would be impacted. So there's just the snowball effect, right? It's really disappointing that, and really frightening to see the road that we're heading down. And I think I think we've started in it, and it's something that I refer to as called a vicious cycle, where we have wages that are stagnated. When wages stagnate, people don't buy as much. So when people don't buy as much, or they don't...
The economy would just...
Then companies don't invest. They actually send people home. So like we see that with Unilever and so on, where persons are going to get sent home. When they send people home, that's less tax revenue for the country. Governments then invest less in things like education and so on. Population becomes less employable. So then unemployment continues to increase, then wages continue to stagnate, and the cycle just continues. So it's a never-ending cycle of bad stuff, right?
And even when you look at it from a trade union perspective, it's an attempt to just do away with trade unions.
Yeah.
Because if you have, I'm going to use Unilever for instance. Unilever, the workers who are supposed to be sent home or who may be sent home, we're not sure as yet. They are all unionized workers. In other companies, the target is just mainly unionized workers.
Correct, yeah. So the aim is to destroy the unions, because the unions represent the last bastion of hope for the working class in this country.
You're absolutely right.
To be honest. And the average working man, even if you are not in a union, you have to recognize that what we do, trade unions do, is we set the precedent for everybody. So once we are the lobby groups to the Minister of Labour to ensure that laws are changed to reflect good industrial labor benchmarks. So 40-hour work week, having sick days, maternity days, those things, that just didn't happen because the employer wanted it to happen. Those are things that the trade unions fought for to happen, right? So we find that the employer class, which is the 1% class, if you want to say that, is commonly referred to now, they focus on the bottom line. They don't focus on much else other than maximizing profits. I mean, they have shareholders, they have to meet certain profitability targets and so on. The offset for that is for us as trade unions to ensure that employees aren't exploited
Yes.
in their strive for that. And it also impacts, and it's also relevant when you're talking about an economy. And to me, a lot of our budget focuses on GDP, gross domestic product, and maximizing GDP and so on. But in many countries, and there's a trend that's happening now where the conversation has switched from, is GDP the correct measure for measuring a country's success? Or is that what we should use as the sole measure to formulate financial policies and so on? In some countries, they've actually looked at the happiness index of the populace to make decisions. I mean,
I'm not sure how that will work in Trinidad.
Right. Because we rank high on the happiness index, right? But places like New Zealand, have moved away from just looking at GDP, but have looked at things like sustainability, with greater emphasis on the environment and the working class, right? So it's a combination of all. We're not quite sure if those models could fit in Trinidad, but definitely we need to start rethinking how we look at economics. Even the big shots at the Davos Economic Forum in Switzerland started talking about that, if GDP is really a proper measure, because it leads to government making policies. And what we're seeing right now is such great income equality, where you have a burgeoning lower class, a eroding middle class, and a 1% that controls most of the wealth of the country. And that's not how society is supposed to be set up.
And time and time again, you see that measures implemented will always be to the benefit of these.
Of course, because those are the ones who could lobby the government, those are the ones who could provide campaign finances for you to be in power. And when you get there, of course, you have to pay in kind. I mean, when we look at this, I think it's the Alora real estate development by the Minister of Finance, and you see that the law was changed to benefit persons who are constructing multi-home apartments or dwelling spaces and being afforded special tax exemptions. I mean, how much are the average man's going to benefit from that? That redounds to only the benefit of large property developers, and we're giving them tax exemptions. And this is the business class who already benefit from loopholes in the system. So whereas me as the ordinary working man, my taxes come out directly from my salary before it hits the bank. For these businessmen, it's the opposite. They get to expense everything before they pay taxes, right? So the system is skewed. It's something that we think that we need to look at. Not quite sure.
Sooner rather than later.
Not quite sure it's going to happen in this budget. To be honest, with the impending budget in October, I'm not very hopeful.
What do you hope to see? Do you even hope to see anything?
I hope to see that monies are allocated to clear government debts to the ordinary man. So contractors should be paid their monies. I hope to see monies paid to public servants for their outstanding negotiations for such a long time. I hope that monies are allocated rather than to mega projects, allocated to more projects like finishing schools that are so close to being finished but not finished. Have those things be the focus and the priority, where the average person could actually see the benefit, rather than these mega projects for hundreds of millions of dollars that doesn't have any really real tangible benefit to everybody.
I think it's time we also place more emphasis on the happiness of the public sector in terms of public servants. You know, because time and time again we've seen where not just the PSA or not just NATO or the OWTU, we've also have the tutor. And they all have one thing in common: stall negotiations from way back when. It's so disturbing to know that, you know, and one thing I remember, I was talking to a teacher and she said, you know, how could you have someone saying that at the end of the day, that's all public servants get to do, make noise when the month end comes, and we don't produce anything? And I'm like, you know, that's
Everything that you do, everything that you have is a public servant. You get water in your pipes because of a public servant. You have electricity because of a public servant. You have your ID card, your driver's permit because of a public servant. If you have to everything, your whole life revolves around the work of a public servant. So you can't say that we have not contributed. I mean, I do admit that there may be issues where efficiency could be improved, but I think that
is triggered by a lot of factors.
Right. So I do think it's the employees or the public servant to blame. I think it's the systems, policies, and procedures that are in place that are antiquated. They're working with legacy systems rather than new technologies. They do not, in most cases, have the appropriate tools to do the jobs that they're required to do. They're not being paid traveling. If somebody's not being paid traveling, how do you expect this person to effectively do their job going out into the field and doing what's required? I mean, so they need to be equipped with proper tools, be placed in a good working environment. Some of the environments that they're working in is so bad.
The working conditions are poor.
Poor, really poor. But that's things that could be fixed, and I'm hoping that this budget, that something can be done to do that, rather than these mega white elephant type prosperity projects that tend to take precedent, because then if you're spending $500 million, 50 million could go missing and nobody knows where it goes.
Well, again, like you rightly said, with agriculture, the government doesn't really stand to benefit, you know. There's no kind of underhand deal that they can't just say, well, okay, I can get this easily, but...
But I don't want to say that there is not any kind of underhand dealings in the sector as well. That does happen, and most of it has to do with land tenure and so on. So you would have seen for several issues raised along that sphere. The Commissioner of State Land was on suspension for a little while, coming out of discrepancies with land state leases and so on. So it's not that there isn't potential, but right now I think the politicians view it as too small scale to be bothered with. I mean, with a budget that's under $1 billion, this is the agricultural industry. The budget, last year's budget, I think was $0.78 billion, which is really, really insufficient. I mean, that just barely meets the recurrent expenditure for the ministry. So, I mean.
And every year that amount just keeps decreasing and decreasing. While food prices just keeps increasing and increasing. Correct. Like, how much sense does that really make? You know?
So a lot more needs to be done. We need to get the food import bill down. We need to start getting our local farmers to produce at the rate that we were producing before, by incentivizing investment in the sector, so that then there's availability of fruits and vegetables that's locally grown for persons to buy. But once again, when the large importers of food, large campaign financiers,
of course, you can't really touch the
agriculture
between
industry
suffers.
And
will continue to suffer as long as we have that mentality going on and on and on. I don't know if that will stop anytime soon, you know.
Well, I'm hoping that it does.
We could hope.
And let me tell you where my hope lies. I mean, it's a sad thing for the PSA that the president has announced his retirement from the PSA. Retirement. But that is where my hope lies. And I'm hoping that this is the last budget that we have with this sitting finance minister, because I'm hopeful that current President Watson Duke would be in reins of power come next budget, and I think it's then we will see some tangible differences. And that's where my hope lies. I don't expect much from this budget. I think it's going to be more of the same. We have been, our revenue streams have declined. Our opportunities for getting revenue has declined. I know they're speaking about the housing bond. I'm not quite sure how the average man is going to benefit from the housing bond. when they say bond, a bond is really borrowing. Because you're issuing a bond that people are going to buy that you're going to have to pay back at a future date.
Yeah.
So it's really borrowing, right? So that's how we're meeting our expenditure right now.
I don't know if you would have seen this report last night where the members of the fire services, they held a press conference yesterday,
Yeah.
calling on HDC to live up to that.
Correct. An agreement that was made in 2008.
Yeah, and-
I mean, we're more than a decade past that agreement, right?
It makes you wonder,
Yeah, and
like-
Severin Richards from the president of the association, he was calling on people. He said, "Let us know the truth. Are we going to benefit from this or not?"
Yeah.
But I don't have people in limbo. And I think that is where most people stand.
Yeah.
Let us know upfront what's
Just
going to happen.
Come and tell us
Come
as
clean,
it is.
so we can
Yeah.
know how to
Put things in place.
Yeah, how to plan for the future, right? I mean, with a lot of instability is derived when there's uncertainty.
Yes.
And that is what our economy needs, right? Stability. We need to be clear on where we're going, what's the vision, what's the plan, what's the diversification plan, where we're getting income from, and how we're spending money.
And what is your backup plan? Because if you just keep investing in the oil and gas industry, you have competition now from Guyana. Guyana has been doing extremely well when it comes down to oil and gas. And your main focus is only on oil and gas. You have the tourism sector, you have the sports sector, you have entertainment, you have mainly the agricultural sector.
Yes.
But yet you see these sectors just being treated as, well, they're just small. We're not going to really pay any attention to them.
Yeah.
But I think it's time that we see some sort of investment into the sector, more than usual. And that's the only way we can actually bring in revenue. We hear so much about foreign exchange. There's always been this shortage of foreign exchange, and through agriculture, you'll get trade, you'll get tourism,
Correct.
and in the end, foreign exchange.
Yeah, and we have products in the agricultural sector that are really just waiting for investments. I mean, we have some of the finest cocoa in the world.
Yes.
Our honey is really, really good. We have local fruits that can be capitalized on as, we could differentiate our products based on local things that we have that are unique to us. I think that's where the emphasis is. As I said, foreign exchange opportunities in agriculture is a big thing.
Yeah.
Our foreign exchange reserves have been dwindling, which is another frightening thing because everything that we do relies on the foreign exchange, right? We import so much that we need to have foreign exchange because we don't have no backup plan in terms of agriculture for food security for us. So without foreign exchange, we can't import.
Nope.
I know a lot of talk has been going on about the exchange rate.
Devaluing the dollar as well.
Devaluing the dollar and so on. The government right now has been buffering that by releasing whatever reserves we have, floating that into the public, and as well restricting on the amount of foreign exchange that people could buy.
Yes.
But a devaluation of the dollar would be devastating to the poor man.
And I don't think people quite understand how much that will be negative for our economy.
Yeah, and I think the benefits to be derived by devaluing the dollar are much less than the social fallout and impacts that it will have on the population. Whereas devaluing the dollar will make local manufacturers, their goods more competitive in the international market. What percentage does the manufacturing sector contribute to our economy? And those are things that I think we have to weigh out before making such a drastic decision.
Yeah.
I do believe, however, that with our dwindling foreign exchange reserves and no foreign direct investment to the level that we require coming in, that we're going to reach a point where it may become inevitable. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. In 2015, I don't have the exact figures, but I think our foreign exchange reserves were like about 11 billion.
Yeah.
They're now down to about 6, I believe.
I don't want to say for sure.
So,
But
I
it's
mean,
it's
it's
really
dwindling,
low,
right?
yeah.
It's dwindling. I mean, I recently went on vacation to Canada. And trying to get foreign exchange for that trip was one of the
Oh my
most
gosh.
challenging things, right? It was really, really challenging. So you don't really see the impact until you have
Until
to
you're
actually
in
the
it.
process and you try
Yeah.
to go and get it. Then you realize, boy, we're really in
Yeah.
a bad place, right? I think for this period, one last budget to go, hopefully, for this finance minister. It's just to hold our breath and hang in there and try to survive it.
When you look at the economy from the time this government has taken up office to present, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Inexperience. I think that we have a finance minister who is inexperienced, not qualified in the vagaries of finance or money or even accounting. And I think that has shown. I mean, you can't get away from it. There was a big hit in the energy sector with
Yeah.
oil prices. But to me, yes, that would have had an impact. But I have always been told that our economy is not really an oil economy. It's a gas-based
gas.
economy, and gas
And
has
we don't
remained.
invest so much in gas.
No, but gas prices have always remained fairly consistent.
Yeah.
Even oil prices, they're no longer $20. In fact, they have been over the budgeted price as far as I'm aware for the longest while.
Yeah.
So for the last couple of years, probably 3 years or so, oil prices have been higher than the budgeted price. So we should be earning the kind of revenues that were projected for the budget. But you're not seeing any tangible expenditure. You're not seeing money being spent to develop infrastructure in terms of the roadways and highways,
I was
services
told
to
that the Minister of Transport, Rohan Sinanan, he has announced plans to do a mass paving exercise.
Right, so that's when you know an election is coming, right?
And that was my point. I said to
that's
myself,
the number one
okay,
indicator.
elections are sometime soon, isn't it?
Yeah. Politicians will be politicians, right? I mean, I know that the economy would have taken a hit.
Yeah.
I think that money would have been saved up so that in this final year before the elections, things like those things could then start to happen. But how could you enter into new projects and new contracts and persons who, other contractors have outstanding monies for such a long period? Are those persons going to be paid? So, I mean, whereas before in the past you would think that entering into contracts with the government is a safe investment for your business, I think it's not so safe anymore.
It's not. It's really not.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I really, really do hope that we see in this budget is a little more investment in the agricultural sector, and paying out of outstanding monies to the public sector in particular. It's something that they deserve.
Yeah. I have given up hope. While you remain hopeful, I have given up hope with that. I think that the finance minister, he has never been impacted directly by agriculture to say that he has ever had a portfolio as an agricultural minister, or he has any agriculture projects or
and he chooses
investments.
not to learn.
And I recall distinctly, and this is something that I would remember because I'm in the sector, that he was on a late night talk show after a newscast, and they were talking about diversification, and the host asked him about, why this continued investment in the energy sector. And he scoffed and he was like, so why you want me to invest in agriculture? And laughed.
Wow.
Right? So that alone
tells you
where their priorities lie, and it's not in the agriculture sector.
So you keep investing in something that is just, I don't want to say dying, but the energy sector, as we all know, it's not as it used to be.
So we're still suffering from Dutch disease. We haven't fully been healed of that from what I have seen. But, I mean, we can't invest in energy, but you have to invest in other things as
Yes.
well. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. Normal man on the ground would tell you that, right? You diversify, diversifying reduces your risk. So in case there's a hit to one sector, you have other sectors that can buffer that, right? It's same as investing, it's same as lending money in a bank, it's the same, right? Risk, managing risk. And one of the greatest ways to manage risk is by diversifying your risk.
You are aware of what you can and
I
cannot
think
do.
now calls for some strong action. I think what people in the past would have made certain sacrifices for us to enjoy the benefits that we have right now, we owe it to future generations to do the same.
Yeah.
We owe it to our
And
children
we need
and
to stop being
grandchildren
so
to
selfish
yeah.
and think, well, okay, it's
Somebody-
not affecting me, so I'm not going to
Correct.
say anything, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to stay here and take whatever comes my way.
Yeah.
But think about your future generation.
correct.
And I don't think most of us do that, you know.
No.
We just sit here and say, well, okay, it's
Short
not
term today for
affecting me,
tomorrow.
so I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
But in the long term, when you have a child and they start facing some of the problems you could have remedied back in whenever you were working and you
Correct.
could have done it, you didn't do anything.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if people don't understand it, I mean, or they don't feel it as much, but I was chatting with some of my friends the other day and they told me that their quality of life is much better than their parents' lives were.
Right.
And I was like, well, yeah, but that's not because of you. That's because of technology that has improved, that has made life more comfortable. But my grandfather was a taxi driver back whenever, 50s or whatever. He worked alone. He had 7 children. His wife was a housewife. They had a house. They had land in their name.
Yeah.
Could you accomplish that on your own now? No. Women had to go get into the employment. I mean, sure, there are independent women who would have worked anyway, but women were forced into the workplace to earn a second income for the household, to support the household. Without my wife, I may not have been able to afford the mortgage for our property,
Yeah.
which young professional now could comfortably say, at least in the public sector, comfortably say that they could purchase land, build a house, and pay a mortgage.
And even in the public sector, it's kind of being taken away.
Yeah.
Because
so
of
you
the
find
introduction
more and
of
more
contracts.
persons moving into renting. Renting just places money into property owners and their select property owners, right? And at the end of renting, you own nothing, right?
Yeah,
so
it's dead money, like you call it.
yeah. So I think our quality of life has not improved over the years. Yeah, let me rephrase that. Our quality of life may have improved because of technology.
Yes.
But what we can afford and our independence has deteriorated.
Yeah. I have no idea where this time went. Wow.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to finish.
What time flies when you're having fun, right?
Avinash, I'm going to ask you your closing comments.
I just want to say that while I have no hope for this budget, I do hope that for the next one, the one after this one, we have people in charge. I hope that the president Watson Duke will be the next prime minister of this country, and better days will be ahead of us then.
Until then, we can only hope, and time will tell.
Okay.
So on October 7th, who knows? We can either see the same amount of money being allocated to agriculture, perhaps more if there's a pink sun, or less, as is the norm.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on this morning. Really a very enlightening conversation, and it's always nice to hear the perspective of the man who's actually involved in the sector. So thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.